Hi, it's Aunt Michelle. I'm in a library in Texas that a man named Henry Rosenberg gave money to create. And this is the oldest library in Texas. Isn't that interesting? And it's about 100 years old. So I have 3 books that I would like to read for you. This one is about murals, and that's when you paint on a wall and people paint scenes of everyday life, something that's important that happened in history. And then this one is about 500 years ago when a very famous man named Michelangelo carved out the David sculpture. And David was a shepherd. That means that he worked with sheep. And David stepped up because they needed somebody from the community to step up and fight the Goliath, the giant. And David stepped up. And so I'm going to tell you the rest of the story. And then the last one, you know me, I love art. And the last one is the science behind art. So we're going to learn a little science and art mixed together. All right, so here we go. Get comfortable. On cave walls in Europe, there were these scratching paintings that are about 15 to 30,000 years old. And these paintings were made with a stick and charcoal from after when they were cooking, and stone that they broke apart and made a powder. And these are called cave art. These cave paintings, nobody really knows what they mean, but we do know that they're thousands and thousands of years old, and that the artists were showing us the animals that they hunt. This book is called Stone Giant, and it's about an artist that found a very, very big block of stone in the middle of Italy, and he decided to carve into it. Isn't that beautiful? Now, I'm going to start from the beginning, so get comfortable. There was a giant in the city of Florence. It had been there for more than 40 years, and no one knew what to do about it. The giant that I'm talking about was an enormous block of stone, marble to be exact. It stood 3 times as tall as anyone in the building. It was the color of cream, and it was a troublemaker. It hadn't started out that way. In the beginning, the giant, as everyone called it, had been part of a glorious plan for the city. City fathers had hoped to have the stone made into a statue. It was to be a statue of David, the shepherd boy from the Bible who killed the giant warrior Goliath. David and Florence were a lot alike. At the time, the city of Florence was part of a small, proud republic. The idea, anyway, was that Michelangelo would get the stone, and he didn't get that far. For years, the giant piece of marble just lay in the middle of the city, and it even had a hole in it. But city officials offered Michelangelo quite a bit of money to complete it. So a 26-year-old Michelangelo who grew up in Florence, Italy, he decided to take on the tasks. Michelangelo went to the city and asked to work on the giant. They immediately gave him the job. Michelangelo wasn't about to have people gawking at him and looking and asking questions. So he built a giant wooden shed around the sculpture. On the front of the stone, he drew the outline of David. Then All there was needed to do was to carve out David. Chips of marble flew through the air. He cut himself many, many times. Day after day, Michelangelo worked furiously. Every night he went home, floured with the dust. In the summer, the stone dust mingled with the sweat of his skin. Some nights he was too tired to even go home and just slept at the work site. Then one day, after nearly 3 years, Michelangelo put down his tools, he stepped back, and of course they didn't have electricity 500 years ago, in the year 1500, and he had to use candles, and he saw his work of art. The people from the city, they had to help him bring it into the city of Florence, the middle of them, and then there it was, the statue of David. Now, David is naked, and you might be wondering why. That's because the way that Michelangelo did the sculpture was that he had over his shoulder, it was a slingshot. And so it's to show how courageous David was, that even though he didn't have armor on to protect him, he did have a slingshot. And when he approached Goliath, he shot him right in the middle of the forehead with the slingshot. And so that's why this statue is so famous. It's the first time David was ever made like this. And so here's the slingshot over his shoulder, and he looks kind of scared there. But he stepped up and he said, I'll fight. I will fight the giant. And Michelangelo was the talk of the town. It's a real story. In fact, your dad and I and Nana and Renee and Uncle Ross, we all went to Italy in about 20 years ago, and Daddy saw the statue in Florence. I wonder if he remembers. You have to ask him if he remembers. All right, are you ready for the last book? The last book is about science and art, so let's dive in. Hey, do you remember cave art that we just talked about? Well, I told you that was 15 to 30,000 years ago. Here's some of the animals that the cavemen painted on the walls. They took stones and ground it up, and charcoal, put it on a stick. And here they are blowing that powder around their hands. Now, people don't exactly know why they did this, but I think I have a feeling. They wanted to be remembered. We all want to be remembered after we die. And in the ancient world, the Egyptians, they made these giant statues. Now this one, unfortunately, the head and the shoulders came off. So this guy is damaged. But here's some other Egyptian pharaohs. That means kings. And that was about 4,000 years ago. They started to realize that if you look at some artwork, the lines all connect to a dot, and that makes it look real, even though it's flat. Here's another example. You see the lines here? These lines help the artist make the artwork look 3D. And we were just talking about 500 years ago. Well, that's this period of time, and that's when artists would learn from each other, and they would grind up powder and mix it with oil to make oil paint. And they would get models to sit in front of them and paint them on canvas. Here's another famous artist named Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci. And that is not his last name. Da Vinci means from Vinci. He was also Italian, so that means Leonardo from Vinci. And this page is talking about, look how dark, 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 dark these artists painted, and light, 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 to make it look like a real window. Maybe that's moonlight coming in. It adds drama, and it makes it look real. And here's some other artists, like Rembrandt, who painted in the 1600s. He painted his whole life, different portraits of himself. And then in the 1800s, people decided to go outside with their artwork, and they took their paints in an easel and started to paint real light from nature. And so what they're doing right now is probably very hot, but what they're doing is they're painting from nature. Now, this is a very famous painting. This one is called The Scream. And this is about a man who was on a bridge, and he suddenly has kind of like an attack. He kind of has shortness of breath. His hands get all cold but sweaty, and he starts to have a dread, a feeling of loneliness. So that's kind of a sad painting in a way. But do you see how the colors are like a rainbow? You want to feel happy, but it's almost like he's in a dream. It's a strange painting. Here's some other famous paintings throughout history. And nowadays, a lot of people use computers. This artist is using, they call this a stylus. And this artist is using a stylus to paint. Here's another famous painting by an artist named Mondrian. Here's some other famous artists. Ooh, look at this. This is a woman that is making a sculpture. I think that's an octopus. Wow, that's kind of strange. I hope you like those books. I know I didn't read every single word. Those books, that would take me a long time. Well, I'm gonna get back to my book now. And I hope you have a great day. I hope you learned something. And maybe you can impress your art teacher when you see her and let her know all the things that you learned about Michelangelo, cave art, Leonardo da Vinci, Rembrandt, and anybody else that you might remember. All right, have a nice day. I love you.